Good morning and welcome to a Yarn Live. This is a special edition with the team from Hudson, Gavin Martin. I love saying that. That's a great brand, guys. And we're looking at the fact that, the pandemic has got us again. So, what we really want to understand is what are some of the smart things that organizations are doing, and how can we turn disaster into opportunity. And we've got an amazing team of people here, leaders in their space. So if you sort of think about it, I always love my rugby analogy. So it's kind of like bringing in the super sub into your team to help get you across the line. And the reason I sort of frame it up like that is that the team here are working on deals all the time. So you as a CEO or some person in your organization that looks after this might do this once or twice a year, but these people are doing it all the time, supporting the likes of yourself. Hence, they've got that experience in this sort of almost specialist type role where they're constantly dealing with it and seeing what's happening in all the different opportunities. So what we're going to talk about with the team is looking at things like managing supplier relationships, fast tracking new ideas in an agile way, and identifying lessons learned from other industries and how they might apply to yours. Doing joint ventures to extract the extra value out of business, whole range of options. We're going to find out about it all today with the likes of Simon and Charlie, Ed, Andrew, and Sarah Jane. So let's get on to our first sort of person. And of course, why not start with the boss? His name's in the brand, Mr. Martin, Simon. Simon. Now, I've known Simon myself personally for quite a while, a couple of years, and I always am blown away by the perspective he brings to my discussions. And disclosure, Hudson Gavin Martin, lawyers for AFQY, and I'd actually say more of very smart business counsel. And I think that's probably the theme we're going to get into. So Simon's got 30 years experience in technology, IP, media law, which means he's a bit of a gun here, bit of a weapon. Extensive expertise across broad range of legal issues. Certainly has helped me with a fefew different weird things. And his work is as diverse as the industries and companies he works with. So probably can look after almost anything. But with that, Simon, I'd like to hand over to you to sort of shape up today's session and give us some insights.
Kia ora, Ryan. Thanks so much for the opportunity to have this chat. I mean, look, I don't want this whole thing to be about COVID because, I think everybody's over those kind of conversations. But the reality is it's the elephant in the room. I think we have to recognize that COVID is changing the way that we have to do things. It's forcing change on us. If you want to look at the positive, though, COVID is teaching us some things on the way through. It's teaching us that we do need to change. That we can't stand still, and it's giving us permission to change. And what it's also teaching us is that actually to succeed, we've all got to collaborate and work together. We're not going to get through this and get out the other side without everybody pulling in the same direction. And the same sort of thing really applies to business as a whole. For New Zealand as a whole to succeed, COVID or no COVID, we need to help bring the small to medium enterprises with us. I mean, the reality is that SME represent about 29% of our workforce, or the employers of 29% of our workforce, and over 25% of the GDP in New Zealand. So help them, lift up their game in this new and challenging world with technology kind of changing all the time. I think we are seeing that the government itself is recognizing that this is an important thing to do, that everybody needs to pitch in. It's not something that you need to do by yourself, that others are going to be able to help you do this. MB have come out with the Digital Boost Alliance, which is an idea about businesses helping businesses embrace change, which is awesome. And there are some fantastic organizations involved in it. And one of the things that I guess I'm really pleased to see that a number of our clients like BNZ Zero, the Mind Lab, 2 Degrees are involved in this and looking for ways to help other businesses embrace change and make differences in their business. Change in itself is scary, and it's kind of the adage of, if it's not broken, don't change it. I'm not sure whether that's necessarily the right mindset for the current environment that we're working in. I mean, you only have to talk to the likes of, Blockbuster to say, is that the right answer? So it's about trying to work out the way to change and to make the change in the right kind of way. I mean, I remember sitting here and listening to one of your chats previously, Ryan, with Sir Ian Taylor in animation research, and the challenge that he had coming into COVID, where, after years and years of effort, he'd really kind of cracked the US market, only to have COVID basically say that he couldn't send technicians over there to kind of deliver the service that was needed. And he sat down with his team and looked at a way of trying to solve this. And now actually, I think he's kind of pretty pleased with where he's ended up, the ability to actually deliver that service from New Zealand, from Aotearoa, without having to make his team travel. So change ended up being a positive thing for him, but it's something that you have to kind of embrace and don't think that you need to do it by yourself. Business in itself, the reality is that business is a series of relationships, and everybody wants to see you succeed, because if you thrive, then they're going to thrive as well. Customers, your team, your contractors, your service providers, they've all got skin in the game, because if your business is thriving, so are they. They may be the ones that have the really good idea. And I kind of think about my good friend David Downs and the SOS Cafe that he started in the very first lockdown, and that really just came from the fact that he liked coffee, and he wanted to make sure that his local cafe continued to be able to operate. And that grew into this, man, did he get that grew and grew, just to an extent that he just had no idea that it was going to get to that scale. And I'm pretty confident now David doesn't need to buy a coffee anywhere in New Zealand as a result of that idea. But it's just it's the fact that you never know where that idea is going to come from. But there are lots of people that are there looking after your business and wanting to see your business succeed. So don't try and think that this is something that you have to do by yourself. I think the great thing about the businesses we get to work with, whether they're large or small, is we get to look at them because of the nature of the work we do. We are kind of working with the innovation part of the business. And what we've seen is, that you build innovation into the culture of the firm, into the culture of the business itself. And that is, don't just appoint somebody and say, right, that's innovation solved. It's about kind of getting everybody to understand that innovation is part of what we need to do. And getting the employees and the contractors and that to give you feedback, because that's really important. You can start with a decision, and don't try and make the decision the perfect decision at the beginning, because nobody really knows how these things are going to play out. But make sure that everybody is involved in the success of that change. Get that feedback, get everybody kind of talking about how can we make an improvement to this, wrap the right kind of team around you to make sure that you're getting that honest feedback about the things that need to change and improve as you kind of evolve your business. I looked at, I was reading an article the other day about Vector, and it talked about how much innovation is going on within that organization. And it's really, I had the good fortune to work with Vector, and it's really pleasing to see the kind of changes that they're making, and the opportunity to sit there and watch that, that they have really built that innovation, baked it into the culture of the firm, looking at ways to try and continue to improve the business that they're running. The fact is that all major companies need to continue to change just the same that small companies do, and you've got to make sure that you don't get complacent and just sit there and think, well, let's just keep doing the things that we're doing at the moment. And if there is one other thing that perhaps has come out of COVID, and I know I'm not supposed to be talking about COVID, but if there's one other thing that's come out of COVID, it's the fact that we've ended up on the world stage a bit because of it. We ended up with people kind of looking at New Zealand saying, crikey, these guys really knew how to kind of combat this and kind of get back to normal life. And so we are seeing lots of players from multinational. Yeah, you're right.
Let's just one. Can't jinx it.
Yeah. Let's hope we can do it again. But major players coming into the New Zealand market and giving things a try here because they think, well, we've really got an innovative mindset. You can look with that digital boost. You've got AWS and Microsoft and Google and Facebook all kind of playing in that to try and help New Zealanders kind of embrace technology. But also I've been involved in a few really interesting joint ventures recently where major players have come into the New Zealand market and are playing with major companies here because they want to try things. They want to see how they'll work in a New Zealand environment and then take that and build it for the world. And that's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to be involved in that. And for the New Zealand businesses, it's pretty cool because they get to shape to an extent what the future looks like for them. So yes, look, changes is inevitable, and I think it's really exciting. It's about how you build the team around you and build the culture to get that change right. And hopefully the rest of the team are going to have a bit of a chat about different areas that they're seeing this happen.
Excellent. So really good points there. And I think if we look back at things like ATMs, I think New Zealand was the first to have ATMs, and that's why we all use our FPOS cards. And we are the perfect bell-shaped population. In fact, NASA even uses New Zealand's anonymised health data because of our population. They use that to work out what they'd need on the manned mission to Mars from a health perspective. So, yeah, that's one aspect of it, and I picked up on innovation. So innovation's in our blood. Kiwi ingenuity, number 8 wire. You talked about Vector, you talked about Sir Ian Taylor, and I'm sure that a whole bunch of the companies that you work with that you can't talk about in public, that innovation, as you say, is baked into their culture, and that's what makes us pretty special and attractive. I think when you mentioned the likes of Google and all the rest of it, they're using New Zealand to test their flying drone. I think it might be called the Kitty Hawk. I'm not quite sure, but a good example. So yeah, all good stuff. We are agents of change, and I will speak about what can't be spoken about. COVID has accelerated it, and it has doubled us down on innovation. So thank you very much for the intro there to frame it up, Simon. I'm going to play musical chairs with everybody and bring on next member of the team. So this is I'll say my good friend Charlie, because we even have chats in the Corrie Lounge. And I almost wanted to give your wee one a hug because it looks so cute, but it was still pretty in between lockdowns, so I didn't. But what we're looking at with Untitled, so I used to see Untitled at a lot of events, especially related around AI. But what we're going to be looking at is Untitled as being a partner of HGM, as an expert in all legal aspects of tech and media. So media, my old stomping ground being Fairfax, Target Daily Times, and I guess maybe even now AFQI could be considered media, and telecommunications. So the last 19 years, Untitled has advised public and private customers and their suppliers alike on the adoption and commercialization of technology, media, and telecommunications products and services, pretty much everything. So what I want to ask you, Untitled, is, you work with many media and telco clients. Can you talk me through what they're doing and how the sector is changing and evolving, please?
Yeah. Kia ora, Ryan. Thank you for having us. Look, the media sector and the telco sector has actually changed a lot, and we've seen a lot of diversification in terms of media and telecoms over the last 18 to 24 months. And it's not just a result of challenging times that we're all facing, but it's also a result of consumer demand and seeking a competitive advantage. So first, I think we've seen media companies really become creative about the use of their resources and the assets that they have. Of course, content production itself is changing with the rise of things like virtual productions, for example. And there's a lot of crossover in terms of the skills and techniques involved in virtual productions. So if you think about it, virtual production technology actually initially came from gaming engines, so game development. But now game developers are actually looking and learning from the camera techniques that DOPs use during virtual productions to actually elevate the quality of gaming visuals. So there is a lot of crossover within the content production industry itself. But media companies are also actually now leveraging those assets and resources that they have for applications that are outside of simply content production. So technology that you would have traditionally thought as being for content production is now being used creatively to solve problems that have arisen, or for broader applications in terms of products and services. So some examples are, for example, software that was traditionally used for media platforms being used to solve problems like queue management. For example, we're always standing in queues these days, and managing those queues requires some software and applications. So there's also AR, VR applications that are being used in hospitals to improve the experience of children and young people in hospitals. Gaming is being used to change behavior and actually achieve social and environmental impact. So there's a lot of creative use of resources in the media sector. I think second, in the sector, collaboration has also been a really strong theme. So industry has really come together in New Zealand to showcase New Zealand as the place to get content created and to get entertainment projects off the ground. And a really good example of this is the Creative Business Now collaboration. So this is a collaboration between a number of suppliers to the film and television industry in New Zealand, and Hudson Gavin Martin, HGM, is a part of that collaboration as well. And the suppliers have come together to showcase to the world the talent that exists in New Zealand to get creative projects off the ground. Effectively, it's saying to people in overseas, in the global space, that New Zealand, whether it's in film, animation, gaming, digital, AR, VR, we can get your project completed right from concept to production in New Zealand. So give us your entertainment projects, and it's in safe hands here in New Zealand, which I think is a really exciting concept. Finally, we're seeing a real, and we've been seeing this for some time, but with the digital mediums that we're all having to take up, there's now a real trend in the convergence of media and telecommunications. Now, these are products and services that traditionally would have been seen in the telco space are now converging into the media space, and vice versa. As Simon mentioned, there are a growing number of collaborations between traditionally telecommunications providers and content providers, and we've seen that happen in New Zealand as well. But what we're seeing now more and more is actually traditional telecommunications providers are investing a lot more in offering content services and digital media products and even content creation tools. And the reason why they're doing that is because they have the backbone to build those digital tools on. And so they are investing a lot more in doing that. We're also seeing a number of cloud service providers coming into New Zealand and combining communication tools and media tools and offering that. So we've just done some regulatory work for a multinational tech and telco provider who's looking to provide cloud services into New Zealand that actually integrate communication tools, data management services, and also content creation tools. Effectively, they are providing a one-stop shop for not just your content creation, but also allowing you to get that content out into the market in the most effective way.
Wow. So there's a lot going on there. I was trying to keep up with the things in my mind of all the questions I wanted to ask, right? So if I think of myself, having mentioned I worked in media, not my first job in media was putting inserts in papers as a teenager. My first real job was an art director, designing advertising, and I used to use Photoshop 3. And what I remember making an ad. This is a bit of backstory for the context. It took me 37 operations to make this 3D bubble text, and it took 2 days to make it, and most of that time was saving it. Now in Photoshop, you can just press one feature and it does it like that. And if you want to change it to one of the other 35 filters, it does it like that. So vastly different from when I was a 19-year-old, now 44, so it's a few years on the clock, and a lot of software has changed. But yeah, AR, VR, the ability to combine this to that, overlay here to there, makes me start thinking of the Matrix, because we're talking about that earlier today with the trailer for the version 4 coming out. So in short, you're in the center of it. You get to see it all. You get to cross it all with all the various clients and be able to make sense of it. So if I come to you with some crazy idea, wow, we want to do this, you're likely to have come across that conversation somewhere along the way.
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome. Well, hey, look, we've had a whole range of comments that popped up. So I threw a couple up while you were talking. They were a little bit related to the in-between discussion, but just thought I'd quickly throw them up because Doug's commented here. I'll just paraphrase that. Talked about for the last 30 years, tech companies have used New Zealand as a bit of a test market. And then we also had Brendan Smith. So, one of the subjects we'll talk about a little bit more later, I think, is the fact that New Zealand is in a great position globally to become a real tech force because of our COVID stardom, but also our very innovative and smart technology that we have bubbling up. Now, this is actually AJ Hazelhurst saying to me, and I apologise to everybody. I should have started the session with Mihi, and at least could have said kia ora because it's Māori Language Week. Now, Toby claimed that New Zealand had the first SMS banking platform. That's a good debate because my brother wrote one for a Mexican bank in Sweden, and when I told him about Mcom having produced the SMS banking system in New Zealand, he said, I wrote that one myself 2 years ago. So who knows, but at least he's a Kiwi. Now, let's look at our next speaker. So we're going to do musical chairs. And when I first met Ed, or Edwin, do you prefer Ed or Edwin?
Ed. I just get Edwin when I'm in trouble.
Okay, so we'll go with Edwin for this one because when I first met Edwin, he was on a piece of media. He was on the front page advert, I think it was front page advert of the Herald, and had this the designer had done this really cool and it looked very steely, almost like the Terminator. So actually bridging onto that, the Terminator, because Ed has a very interesting background. He's not just a qualified lawyer, which you'd hope he was, considering what we're talking about today, but he also has a under and postgraduate degree in information systems. So I'm not quite. What is that? What's a common language for that? Does that mean you've done a degree and then some extra papers, or you've done honours or masters? I don't have a degree, so I
spent 6 years learning how to develop code, and this will probably show how old I am. I was coding in COBOL, but I'm just a little bit older than you, Ryan.
That's all right. So my mum's a CIO, and as I mentioned, my brother writes SAP banking software. So when he was doing his degree back at the time that I was younger than him, because he's older, they were arguing about how to code in COBOL at home because he was doing projects in COBOL. So no, it's just a sign of the times, mate. We're young. We're absolutely so young. So you've got probably quite a deep understanding of tech then, along with legal experience and advising technology clients and advising large organizations on technology and data specific projects, because 6 years of coding, that would have been pretty handy in the back pocket as a lawyer working in tech. So my question for you, Ed, is, you've worked with a lot of businesses in the FMG sector, as well as other businesses here, where consumer data underpins their sort of existence. What are the businesses doing with this data, and what are they doing to protect it? So I guess, if I rephrase that, what are they doing with data? Data is the new oil, or it's the new blood, I guess, keeps the business pumping. And of course, how are people looking after it?
Thanks, Ryan, and kia ora, everyone. It's great to be here. Look, I'm just going to go back to my pre-COBOL days. I mean, when I was a bit younger. So, you remember when you used to go to the supermarket or the dairy, or even playing on the Spaces machine, right? You'd pay for something using cash or coins, and the cashier would basically just punch in the amount in the old school cash register. The great thing about those days is that no one had any idea what my purchasing history was. Not that it really mattered to them, because I was probably just buying jet planes or whatever it was from the dairy. But today, everything has changed, right? So everything that I do is being tracked and analysed, and you've got your, we talk about FPOS payments and stuff like that. So first in the world to kind of do that sort of stuff. We've got the online payments, the credit card or debit card payments, and then at the same time, let's swipe a loyalty card while we're at it. So everything that I'm doing and that you're doing is being tracked. And so my data and your data is the lifeblood of most businesses today. And if you have a look at today's shopping experience, it's just so much different, and that's been helped out by a lot of our cool clients like Foodstuffs, Aurora, and other tech startups. Once upon a time when we were able to leave our houses, well, a lot of us can't at the moment, to go to a shopping mall, I drive to if I wanted to go to a shopping mall, I'd drive to the car park. Now I just don't need to wait for the barrier. The barriers go up because there's a camera at the entrance that's capturing my car registration, number plate. So the mall owners know what I'm doing in there. They know how long I've been there, and they know how to basically charge me a lot for parking. And they also know what kind of car I drive, which is probably a good or bad thing depending on what they want to charge me. So I go into the mall, right? And so I set foot into the mall, and then there's all this camera vision technology that's tracking every move that I'm doing. They know what I'm buying or not buying, and they know where I'm going next. I'd probably, if I was at a Bunnings store, the cameras would go crazy because they wouldn't be able to track me because I just basically just go up and down every single aisle. So if I go into a store, I've got beacon technology or Bluetooth technology on my phone that's tracking where I am in that store very accurately. It's sending me information or messages to my phone saying, hey, yeah, these are the latest specials. I know you don't need this, but you're going to buy it anyway because I'm that type of guy that will just, buy stuff because I don't need it. Someone's telling me to buy it. I'll then go to the supermarket and, great organisations like Foodstuffs have introduced things like the smart trolleys where they're trialling them. They were trialling them and basically they know what I'm putting into my trolley and they know what I'm taking out of it. So I'm making that decision as to, buy it or not buy it, but it also helps with the payment of it because you can basically just, pay for everything and walk out of the store. But some of our other our clients are doing a lot of stuff with camera technology in relation to detecting things like shoplifting and matching it up with data of people who have shoplifted before in that store in the supermarkets. And so that's really helping them to reduce risk. But, I don't shoplift. I'm just using it as an example. And then once I've done that, once I've gone to my supermarket, I've finished with them all, I'll usually end up, because the kids are making me, to go through the fast food drive-through. And so the number plate recognition will pull up my details and they'll know what I'm about to buy. They know that I'm about to buy if it's a Macca's, they'll know that I'll buy a Big Mac and a whatever it is, and then the kids' meal with the toy or a book. So there's a whole lot of benefits of this data to, FMCG and retail. You've got awesome customer insights. Businesses truly understand how people like me behave and others behave. And what that means is they can develop really personalized customer experiences for you and basically serve ads and information and all that kind of stuff to you. And my colleagues will know that I'm a real sucker for Facebook ads. And, a lot of you may have seen the Remarkable ads. I bought one of those off a Facebook ad because they probably knew everything that I was looking at. But it's great because they know what I want, and they can develop products that I want. But the other important thing is it really helps businesses to manage their supply chain, so they know what people are buying when they want to buy it, and to ensure that their products aren't out of stock. So the next time that there's another a lockdown, they'll make sure that there's plenty of toilet paper and flour and all that kind of stuff. That's kind of what I'm seeing from the new technology. But people ask me, well, what are you seeing from a legal perspective? And I think a lot of our clients and other businesses, they really know that customers are concerned about losing control of their data, or even worse, if their data is compromised through a data breach. And so over the years, the privacy laws have changed and have been amended so that they're better, like the Privacy Act 2020, and overseas you've got the GDPR. But what we're finding now is that a lot more businesses are being transparent about how they collect the information and what they're using it for, because they know that they need to get the trust of their consumer. So what that means for us is that we're going through terms and conditions and their privacy policies to make sure that they're a lot clearer, and making sure that our clients aren't trying to hide things in the body of T's and C's, which no one reads anyway. But we're trying to put them at the front of or at the beginning of the documents so that they know what information is being collected. And that's from the what our clients are doing to give their customers assurances about their data. But these businesses are also doing a hell of a lot of due diligence on their suppliers. So what we're seeing now is, businesses who are dealing with data, they're looking to their IT suppliers or their cloud providers, trying to work out, how do you secure your data? Is it are your systems secure? Are they safe from a data breach or a cyber attack? When you look at what's happening now with QBank and ANZ, with the DDoS attacks and ransomware attacks just over the last few weeks, so it's really important that data is secured. So there's a whole lot of stuff that businesses are doing to make sure that their suppliers are making sure that the data is secure. And this isn't just in the FMCG or retail market, but this is across all industries like government and private sector. So anyway, I started off this discussion talking about how no one knew about my purchasing habits, but everyone does now. And I'm pretty cool with that. I just want to know that, my information is being, I want to know when it's being used and how it's being used. And as long as the business is doing everything that it can to secure that information, then I'm pretty cool if it means that I have a better shopping experience and I get to buy stuff that I don't really need.
Absolutely. So, in your top drawer, how much chocolate have you got sitting there at the moment?
I have no chocolate because I got off chocolate a few years ago.
Good man. So yeah, it's a really interesting debate, that one, isn't it? Because people, in one discussion I hear people talking about, oh, this was really cool, I saw this thing, I did this thing, and the next thing I knew, this popped up, and I really needed it. So it was cool. And you're like, that's because they have tracked and understood your needs and presented you with something, and they're like, oh, really? But then you'll hear the same person the next week say, oh, I was searching up Jimmy Choo shoes, and the next thing I had Jimmy Choo shoes through my feed and every Facebook and every social media. I couldn't get it. It was like they were chasing me all around social media. Everywhere I went to this website, there was Jimmy Choo shoes. I'll go that one. And it's like, okay, well, the question is, why are you searching Jimmy Choo shoes? But that's another question. So yeah, that aspect of people tracking us and understanding us and the benefits and the concerns. And I guess this is one of the biggest pieces of change that people are dealing with, because it's affecting every consumer. And of course, think of the bell-shaped curve of a population that we talked about at the beginning. You're going to get the extremes at one end that aren't into it, the extremes at the other end that love it, and then the most in the middle that are kind of quite happy with it. But you mentioned foodstuffs. We had Chris Quinn on the Talanoa series about COVID, the subject we won't talk about. And he shared some amazing stats and facts, including that they had just put in, well, I think it's just put in, maybe 3 years ago, they put in a completely new SAP system. And I loved his comment, which was, we now have a comprehensive digital system that will allow us to put anything on top of it that we want to. A new promotion, a new concept, a new something. If it's digital, it can be added onto it. And of course, you talk about security and those 4 letters. I think everyone is still not quite clear about GDPR. Of course, there'll be some people and certain people in every business that is, but most people in business kind of go, what? So, of course, talk to you. I think I better have a conversation with you about my GDPR, not to alert or concern anyone that comes to AFQY, but I just want to do the right thing and be smart about it. So thank you very much. And we just have a last little comment. You see I've been putting up comments as we go through. So I don't know if you know Francis, but thanks very much. Appreciate you tuning in. So now we'll move to our next person. So it's actually just swapping you over, I think, if I've got myself right, and bringing on Sarah Jane. So I can't wait to crack this one out, because Sarah Jane is special counsel. So I was joking with the team earlier, does that make you like the SAS of law? And everyone really quickly went, yes. So we'll find out a little bit more about Sarah Jane's, skills, doing tuck and roll, pop and, but as a law specialist, Sarah Jane advises startups and emerging growth companies on their capital raising. And interestingly, I actually met Sarah Jane at the recent Aotearoa AI Summit as one of the organisers, and great event, amazing speakers, and lots of things from startups to obviously the big brands they're bubbling away. But advises those and and emerging growth companies on their capital raising. Something I learned so much about over Tech Week with all of the different organisations that were part of Tech Week. So looking forward to adding to that today. Shareholders and employee share purchase scheme arrangements. Well, we're living in this era of people over profit. So of course, a lot of business owners are wanting to make it a lot more fair for their employees and team members, because that gives them more interest in doing a great job if they're part of the growth, right? So as well as sale and purchase transactions, and including founder exits. So what's your exit strategy, everybody? Hope you got one, or maybe you don't. Talk to Sarah. So question, what am I going to ask you? Well, as you're always helping clients with your capital raises, whether it's a seed raise right up to Series B, obviously getting the money in the bank is the number one factor for a cap raise and will always be. But what other trends are you seeing from companies seeking out investors looking to invest? Give us the rundown.
Kia ora, Ryan. Ko Sarah Jane toko ingoa no Auckland ma Manatoki o ki Tipuna ki te noho aki Greyland. So that's a little bit about me, and as Ryan said, I'm Sarah Jane. It's great to be part of today's yarn. As Ryan said, I work on a lot of cap raises. I'm actually working on 2 different cap raises at the moment. Both companies are in the tech space, and one's doing a seed, so an early stage round, and the other their Series B, so their 5th investment round. And when I was thinking about today's session, it was interesting to see how both of these raises reflect some of the recent trends that we've been seeing. So investors are seeking out investment of smart, not dumb money. Investors seem to be oversubscribing for cap raise rounds, and the importance of investors looking after themselves. So firstly, for most of us, there has been a time or times in our lives when we've had to regularly check and monitor our bank accounts. Days as a student, eating noodles, saving for a house, or even an overseas trip. Well, maybe not at the moment, right? So if you speak to those who have started their own business, most will have a story of living close to the edge and being unsure how bills will be paid. It's almost like the entrepreneur's equivalent of battlefield scars. And at some point, many businesses need to look for external investment. Often this is done through cap raising. For example, issuing shares or convertible notes or loans in consideration for cash. Where some companies once may have been happy to treat all potential investors equally, provided they're able to write a check with the correct number of zeros on it. What we've been regularly seeing is that companies looking to raise capital, and I'm not just talking about companies with a proven track record doing their Series B, Series A round, but also startups doing a seed round of $1 million or less, are seeking out smart money. And by smart money, I mean money that offers something more than just growing a bank account. So investors that have experience in investing in other businesses in the same industry. They have a deep understanding of what a business is about and want to continue to invest to grow that debt. The investors that have understanding and experience in commercializing and growing a business, so taking an idea from conception to reality, executing on a strategy, and good corporate governance, whether at a director or an advisory board level. Those that have connections and networks that a business can tap into, whether in overseas, if the business is looking to expand, or in our New Zealand market. That they get what the business that they're investing in is about and have the same goals. Anshali and I had a good example of this when we acted for an early stage niche food manufacturing business. They had an investor who was looking to invest, but even at the DD and term sheet stage, it became obvious that they wanted to ramp up production and expand product lines at scale that founders were just not comfortable with. It was obvious that one wanted to run while the other was still working. The founders eventually said thanks, but no thanks, and will continue to do it alone. So investors that are investing for an impact, and this could be to drive and or make social and environmental changes. So not just financial returns. Investors that align to the long-term vision of the founders and also the wider team, the collective. Essentially, we're all paddling in the water in the same direction. And those with a longer-term focus. So the companies know that the investors are going to stick around longer than just getting their first dividend payments. So it's not just companies taking money, i.e. dumb money because it's offered or available. And on the flip side, what we're seeing from a number of investors is that they are also looking for companies that are the right fit for them. Some of them are looking to invest in businesses that have the same social and environmental impact goals. And we saw this recently with IEF, so the Impact Investment Fund, investing in our client Tether. They're keen to work with founders who are investing in their businesses and who see investment funds more as a strategic partnership where all parties can work together to take a business to the next level. They don't just want to hand their money over and sit back. So it's an understanding that those in a business, whether they're founders or investors, or founders and investors, are essentially business partners. Simon likes to use this analogy. So they're entering into a business marriage contract where they talk openly about what they want and need, and through that alignment can make the money go further. So secondly, and interestingly, there also seems to be a lot of money that is around to be invested. In the last 18 months, a lot of the cap raises we've been working on have been oversubscribed. So companies looking to raise $1 million may have investors totaling 1.15, 1.2 or more, or investors just keen to take up a whole $5 million investment round. Yes, these companies are all offering a tech solution, but the markets that they service are broad. So the construction industry, the retail industry, the supply chain, pharmaceutical, or property, with Tether's building performance technology, for example. Those are just to name a few of the ones that we've worked on recently. I'm not sure whether it's because money's cheaper at the moment, whether people are not traveling, we're not meant to talk about it, but due to COVID restrictions, and instead in looking to invest their money into domestic investments. Or maybe some people, and this is definitely not me, have more time, so they're seeking out different opportunities, time in lockdown to search and maybe research. Not sure, but it definitely seems like investors are out there and willing to invest. And thirdly, working a lot with early stage investors, we see that it can be a really lonely, it can be an all-consuming, and it's an exhausting journey for people to bring up what we call their business baby. Sometimes it can impact on their personal and social life, their physical, mental, and also their emotional health. This is especially true when it comes to cap raising. And I know I've mentioned Tether before, but I talked to Brandon from Tether after finishing their recent seed raise round. And that had been a 7-month process for them. They spent, the beginning of the year building their pitch deck, talking to potential investors, to getting the 3 investors money in the bank. And even though we had the discussion right back at the beginning about how much time the cap raise would take, he said at the end that he hadn't fully appreciated how time consuming it was and the time that it would take away from him and some of the team from working on the business. So it's a real positive trend when we hear our founder clients mentioning that in addition to working on and also in the business, that they're also investing in themselves. So sometimes this is taking on a formal business mentor or a career coach. Sometimes it's regular catch-ups with others who are on or have been on the same entrepreneurial journey. And sometimes it's just carving out personal or family time during the workday and making it known that that's what they're doing. So the implied message is they're off the clock for some much needed me time. I wish I had some me time at the moment. Anyway, it's an issue that's got plenty of airtime lately. And I follow the Olympics and also tennis really closely. So professional sports people have been talking openly about their mental health and making big decisions, not just to accept the status quo and move on, but to talk openly about their personal struggles. So avoiding burnout and looking after oneself is important. Seems ironic at the moment that we're talking about that, especially when I'm probably not living the words I'm saying, but what we're seeing is people actively investing in themselves. So not just their business that they're seeking to create and grow, and they're also talking about it. They're telling us that that's what they're doing. And just for me, I think that's a really positive trend that we're seeing. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you, Sarah Jane. And absolutely, it reinforces that people over product, people over profit cliche that I mentioned at the beginning of the session, I think, in terms of people wanting smart investors, people that can add value, not just add money to the picture, people that add, not just add smarts, but experience, which is a key part of it. And those that have done it before in a similar industry. So, yeah, it is a strategic partnership. It is a marriage because you bring on someone with, an amazing amount of experience that can really accelerate and probably make the money they give you more efficiently or optimize the use of it. And the last one I thought was really important is the mental health, right? So mental health is the new black. And I go back years, and we all know, you go back, 10 years maybe, at least, or it'll be 20 to be absolutely sure. If you mention mental health, people would look at you sideways and walk away. What did you say? So it's really changed. And you're talking about Brandon from Tether, a 7-month marathon is how I framed it. I know Brandon. And I haven't been through a raise myself, but some of the things you talked about just gave me some amazing insights. And I'm thinking of the people out there that are on the verge of this journey and, the ability to get a bit of a heads up, or what we might refer to as a playbook. But I think it's a personal playbook, like a personal story. Could be quite useful because, if you're not ready for that 7-month marathon or whatever it is, we'll just call it the marathon, then it can be highly affect you greatly. And probably the most public or well-known example of that is Janine Crossan from Flossie, who wrote, sort of her letter about looking at attempting suicide, and was just absolutely sort of burned out, and thankfully didn't, and is still with us, sharing true life experiences today. So thank you very much for that. That's brilliant. So I'm now going to swap you around with the lucky last, Andrew Dentis. Andrew, and I've got to say that Andrew is a pretty special person in my world because he actually wrote my AFQY contract, and it might make you laugh, but I've never actually used it except for twice, and they're the only 2 problems I've ever had with clients. so it was only by chance.
It was the client, not the contract, right, Ryan?
The contract worked beautifully for both of us. We're resolved to an amicable end. Is that the right word? Amicable, friendly. A good solution for both of us. But it was. I did find it funny that it was just the 2 organisations that wanted to use a contract, whereas everyone else still does it. I say I've got this great contract and send it to people, and they read it and they go, "That's cool." We just get on with business and doing it, which was the original. Simon will be able to confirm this was the original dream of AFQY. Because the old statement is when you have to refer to the contract, things are, so why bother having them? You've got to have a relationship where you don't need a contract. But of course, we all need a contract. I've learned that we need a contract. But we're not just going to talk about contracts today. In fact, I think we're going to be talking more around your expertise in the fintech area, which of course means we're talking about data, platforms, and the as a service. And I know you look after a lot of SaaS clients across HCM. So, those business models are pretty important, and they're the ones that are going to grow the New Zealand economy. So I know you're often advised in the grey area where technology meets regulation, especially fintech. My wife worked in banking for 20 years, and actually for the bank she worked at, put in or rolled out the KYL and KYC and AML. Which of course was thanks to the money laundering of the drug cartels money in Mexico going back a few years ago. So a lot of information you've got to know. An expert, talk about super sub. I don't think I want to try and work out all that information. I would just talk to you. So helping providers, customers, incumbents, and challenges. So my question, mate, is you're doing a lot of legal work in those areas, but you are also closely involved in the industry, at industry level. And for example, you're the deputy chair of FinTech NZ. What are some of the themes you're seeing from around the industry and all the different pockets that you're playing in?
Awesome, thanks, Ryan. Strategically placed right at the end, so I don't bang on. Nice work. That's totally right. The kind of theme, overarching thing that I would say at the moment is that technology is really kind of upending traditional business models. And there was this fascinating stat that came out of a study by McKinsey recently, where they said that the pandemic has essentially accelerated digital transformation by 7 years. So we've kind of been teleported to 2028 in terms of uptake of digital solutions, and doing quite a bit in the fintech space. I think that's an area that's seen, even pre-COVID, just a huge amount of change in a short space of time. So I was part of the legal team at one of the global banks in London for a while, and fintech was part of my remit there. We, even sort of 6 or 7 years ago, went out to a lot of the major law firms at the time and said, do you want to be on our fintech legal panel? And very few of them even had an offering or a kind of team that they could put together around that. And just a few years later, we're talking about a $5 trillion industry globally. So definitely not a niche sort of buzzword anymore. And I think, in this area, it's fascinating to see this kind of battle that's going on for the customer at the moment between incumbents and new tech players. And it's not just fintech, it's in lots of sectors that this is happening. There's incumbent organizations with that kind of existing customer relationship, a whole lot of loyalty, trust, built up over many years. Some people would say inertia if they were being more negative, depending on who you're talking about. But the question is now whether those incumbent organizations have enough in this battle to, I guess, come out over the top of the new digital players who are digital native and kind of laser focused on their particular niche. So, financial services is a great example where a few years ago, people were really happy to do everything through a bank, for example. So, not just mortgages and deposits and stuff, but you had payments, wealth management, FX, kind of even insurance, all transacted through a big financial institution. Whereas now there's this kind of huge competition in all those spaces coming from digital solutions. And these tech companies, they don't necessarily want to be banks or telcos or utility providers. They just want to pick one thing and do it really well. Or you've got the other end of the spectrum, which is kind of these technology enabled platforms, right? So where they're kind of bringing together a whole bunch of different services in a really seamless kind of customer focused way and using cloud and other technology to do that. So the trends, great example, we've just seen a $40 billion transaction where a US kind of payment platform bought an Aussie fintech company, Afterpay. So it's pretty serious stuff now in terms of that sector being turned on its head. The other thing we're sort of seeing is it's a bit of a perfect storm because regulators now jumping on the bandwagon as well of technology and saying, well, hang on, this could be quite good for consumers. It could be quite good for competition. So why don't we stir it up a bit? And the consumer data right's a great example of that, but that they've rolled out in Australia and we're about to do in New Zealand. So, now we're going to have incumbents being basically compelled to make their customer data available to their competitors, essentially to tech companies to build new services. But that, all that said, I feel like, and we do a lot of work with both incumbents and challengers, which is, a really fun part of what we do. But I would say that it's an exciting time for the bigger players, for the incumbents as well, because they are definitely taking up that challenge. And I think Simon talked about some examples that we've seen around that right at the outset. But if you can collaborate and partner to sort of expand into new customer markets, then I think it's a great time for the incumbents, because this kind of free-flowing data is making these collaborations much more powerful and easy to do. Consumer data right's a great example, because if that data is available to fintech companies or Google or Amazon or whoever it might be, it's also going to be available to other banks or other telcos or other energy providers. So, I think if the incumbents can move fast enough, then there's some real advantages that they've got, because they've got that customer trust, got the customer loyalty. And one thing not to be sneezed at, and I was having a yarn on LinkedIn to Peter Fletcher Dobson about this the other day, but they've also kind of got the great man. They've also kind of got the scale and expertise to deal with all the regulation, which is piling up, to be honest, and that's a competitive advantage if you know how to deal with it. And we've seen a couple of instances recently where a couple of younger players have fallen short on that. So I think in summary, it's a really exciting time for everyone that we're working with in the areas that we've all kind of discussed today, and hopefully. Yeah, it's definitely been an interesting discussion for me, hearing from all my colleagues. So hopefully it's been great for everyone as well.
Yeah, definitely. We'll come back to the big group discussion in a second. First, wanted to just reflect on some of the things that you shared, around fintech, and Peter Fletcher Dobson, or hashtag PFD as I call him, because he's got his own TLA, 3-letter acronym, which every good tech person needs. But banking and the incumbents being regulated to open up their data. Are we talking about the open standards API? And that means that, say I'm a person, I've got some ASB accounts, some Westpac accounts, and of course my BNZ accounts. In the past, I'd have to download spreadsheets to combine them, whereas with the open API, I could have an app, and it can bring them all into one place in real time, so that I can see them. Now, I think Monzo is the big brand from the UK going back a few years ago that was a new banking that did this. So it could be some new player like you talk about, some whiz-bang whiz-kid, or it could be the incumbent. It could be BNZ that says we're going to build an app that will enable, with the open banking API, to bring all your different account from other bank data into our app. Now, your point was a few of the new startups have fallen over in terms of governance or regulation, and trust is an important factor when it comes to your money. So, will the incumbents bring out this type of stuff? These are sorts of things I'm starting to think of. And the last wee bit I'll chuck in there is that when I was working with a developer that was working on some banking or fintech stuff, they were Russian, and a theme that had happened in Russia is that the bank had enabled a white label service. So essentially, I could open the bank of AFQY, and it'd have my logo on it, but it was essentially their white labeled banking system behind it, which enabled them to double their market share of the Russian market, which is probably quite reasonable, especially if you've got a few of the oligarchs in your customer base. But yeah, I think what I'm sort of sharing here is you talk about it being a $5 trillion market. I don't know what the growth figures are, but the ideas are bubbling away. The opportunity, where does it stop? I guess it's not going to, but
definitely happy to talk to you about AFQY Bank, Ryan, if we take that offline afterwards.
Well, as long as you write a good contract and include in the fact that you'll be a first customer, we'll be on a good start there. But
Awesome.
Let's bring it back to the group. We've had some really interesting things. One of my questions to you as a group is, do you get the opportunity, being so busy, to actually hear some of the things you've heard from your colleagues today and the depth that you had today, or was it a little bit of a heads up for each of you in some regards? I imagine you will cover the important stuff when you've got to in a meeting and whatnot, but was there any sort of light bulb moments from other areas that you went, oh?
I think that's one of the things I'm really missing about, by being locked down, is that I don't get to have these casual chats so much. So probably at the moment, I feel like I'm a little bit more isolated about it. But I just, I feel pretty lucky to be working with the crew that I've got. As my colleagues, there are some pretty awesome stuff that we're getting to do, and the knowledge that the team have is just, it just wows me every time. So yeah.
Cool. Now I'm just going to scroll back through the comments, so feel free if anyone wants to jump in with any of your thoughts or reflections on what you've been sharing today. I'm just going to pull up a few of the comments that we had, because I think they were more So going back to when Sarah Jane was speaking, Neil Forster, New Zealand's best tennis player these days. Oh yes, the tennis. So there was the
Naomi Osaka.
yes, I was going to say Japanese, but I think she's American.
She's
So she pulled out. Did she? No, it was the American Olympic.
it's a Japanese tennis player.
Yeah. So I'm getting my two things crossed over. There's a tennis player that was the incident was around not wanting to do press conferences for mental health, and then there was the American gymnast who pulled out of the Olympics, who was the gold medal expected gold medalist. So it's quite a big thing. But of course, it just shows the power of mental health. So in terms of mental health, Sarah Jane, is there what would sort of be the average of where things are at? Most people doing quite well, but then they go through an experience like a 7-month raise, and it sort of hits them in the from out of the blue a little bit. Or what would you sort of say in general?
I think like most kind of businesses, you kind of have it's like almost like a bit of a roller coaster. You have your ups and downs, and that really depends on where you're at in the growth cycle, and where you're at with the team and those sorts of things. But definitely when you're looking at a cap raise, you kind of it's all guns blazing. We're really enthusiastic. There's definitely some down moments, but as you get kind of closer to the end, you kind of get that that little bit of that you talked about in the marathon. You can see the finish line. You kind of all of a sudden that last little bit of energy goes. So, and then it's only when you kind of get past the finish line that you look back and you're like, jeepers, there were definitely points where I felt like I couldn't go on. So I think it's often, and everyone's in the trenches and kind of just the drudgery of continuing on that, and you can get in some lows, but overall, I think that's just, again, life, ups and downs, and hopefully it all eventually levels out.
I think Ryan, one of the things to take into account when you're doing that sort of thing as well is that that this is your baby that you're putting out there, and that people are kicking the tires of it and looking at it and judging it and criticizing it and that sort of thing. And and that's the challenge is that you're going through this process where there's a lot of rigor required and a lot of information required, but at the same time there's this emotional process where people are going, oh, do I really want to chuck some money into that? And so it's a really taxing process.
Yeah, and picking holes, and maybe, but it's also there's definitely that validation that you get through a cap raise process. It may be that you felt like you've been kind of up against the wall and everyone's kind of looked at every inch of you, but definitely I think there's the positive validation that comes from having investors who are keen and backing you and wanting to be part of their journey.
Getting to the other end of it and getting that money put in is just the awesome feeling. So
I've got a bit of a question, and there's a question really, because I'm about to share some IP. It's a really innovative idea, and it's related to this, but and maybe it's more directed at Simon, but everyone can share their thoughts, obviously. Has Hudson Gavin Martin ever thought of bringing on a psychologist to the team to support your clients in terms of being innovative, the new world that we live in? Have you seen this anywhere else around the world, or is this a great opportunity to be a leader in the space and provide those part of the service?
I'm not quite sure how to answer that one, Ryan. It's a really good idea. It becomes a question of what is it that we're looking to provide for our clients? What kind of support are we looking to provide? In some ways, we're counselors ourselves in terms of the process that we help our clients go through. I'm not sure at the moment that our clients be ready to come to us for psychological advice. We may be a good shoulder to cry on from time to time, but no idea is an idea that should be discounted.
I would just say, in terms of some of the relationships that we have, they're close relationships, and the best clients I have are the ones, and some of them are from really big organizations, and some of them are from startups. But they're people who you get on with, and you could have a wider conversation with. You're not just talking about the intricacies of a contract. And I think that while it's not a psychological sort of or psychologist service that we provide, it's if you have that sort of relationship, then it makes what we do kind of expand out of the pure legal and actually go into, well, how's your business doing? How are you doing? How can we make this easier for you? And actually, honestly, on the flip side, how can our clients make things easier for us? Because we're past the stage now where the law firm is just like the kind of robots in the background churning out things. Because that's not good for anyone. We are, the relationships that we have are really core to what we do.
Yeah. And I've got to say,
sorry, something we haven't mentioned in this talk is that our practice also includes dispute resolution. So we have a litigation and dispute resolution team, and a lot of the work we do is about unpicking relationships that people have gotten into. And for example, in the media space, we're helping writers or directors get out of production agreements that they've entered into with producers. So there is a lot of hand-holding, and there is a lot of listening and kind of advising that goes on in that area as well.
Yeah,
I think
it's really good.
It can be quite hard for some founders, and Sarah Jane and I find this a lot as counsellors to some of our clients, is that a lot of them are just by themselves. Like there's one or two founders, and we're lucky we can sort of have a whinge to our colleagues and talk about issues. But it's really hard for a founder or who hasn't been through a cap raise before. They don't know what to do, and they'll call us up, and we're happy to talk to them. And of course, we're not on the clock, but it's quite nice to be able to talk to them to help them out. And some of the stresses that they go through is things like, we need to do this cap raise, and the investors saying we've got to get it done in 2 weeks. And it's like, well, guys, it's not going to happen in 2 weeks. And we've done this so many times. And what we try to do is to help them, build in a realistic time frame so that they're not stressed out, because there's a hell of a lot of documentation that needs to be done to get into that stage. And then, if they do agree to that time frame, a real shortened time frame, sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, we've got no time. We don't know how we're going to do this. And it's kind of like, well, we needed to build that extra time. So just trying to help them out in building or giving them realistic timeframes is something that we like sort of doing.
That calming voice of experience, and I've been there a few times with Simon. Someone said crying on shoulders. I think Simon's shoulder's still wet from the last time I was talking to him about some stuff.
But that's really good at the moment when I hear that you're still not using our contract.
But it's a beautiful point, No, you don't necessarily need to have a psychologist on board. It was one of those sorts of divergent thinking ideas that I come up with. But the truth is that you, through the course of a relationship, provide some pretty good friendship and advice, all to help and support your clients. And I got to say, that's one of the things I've really enjoyed. Like I referenced running into Charlie in the Corrie Lounge and sitting there for, I know, probably about 20 minutes before a flight, talking and getting to meet your little one. And, that's certainly not the sort of old school robots that Andrew joked about. So it's, I guess you do feel, but I do feel part of the family, I've got to say. And I'm sure other clients do as well. But coming back to the likes of data protection, security, the DDoS attacks that are happening on a large scale, I don't have enough fingers now for all the ones that have been in the news. So if you think of what was the first one, it was NZX. We've had Waikato DHB. We're now talking about ANZ, Kiwi Bank, I think NZ Post as well. So there's probably quite a list. What about those sorts of moments? Where can legal help? Does it cross over into insurance? I'm not even sure, but I'm sure that you'll be able to help with that. People are worried about that security aspect. What can legal help do to help in that sense?
I think it's one of these things where it's the legal contract is one thing, right? Ensuring that you've got the clauses in the right place, but it's very much making sure that it's prevention rather than sort of reacting to a cyber attack. And so a lot of the times we, especially with some of our startups who collect a lot of data and all that kind of stuff, we'll be saying to them, you need to build these processes in place to make sure that the data is secure and all that kind of stuff. And have a look at your, like I mentioned before in my discussion looking at your vendors who are providing services to you. What are they doing to protect your data? If there is a data breach, how are you going to respond to it? Like, do you have a plan in place? So a lot of these things are sort of what we call BAU type things, which people often don't think about, thinking, we won't get hacked or whatever it might be. And so I think it's really important for any business that's holding information to have a plan in place, because you've got almost no time once you've been hacked and data's out there, or if you've been locked, your hard drive's been encrypted by ransomware or whatever. You need to have a plan in place. So you can't be sitting there in the next 48 hours trying to come up with a plan. So it's really, I think for us, it's telling or advising on how they should come up with that plan. And then the contract is also important, right? But by that time, it's too late.
Yeah. To some extent as well. I mean, it doesn't matter how good your defenses are. Some of these things are going to happen, and then it's about having, talking to people that have worked on these sorts of issues before, and we do give advice around the issues that you need to think about when these sorts of things happen. When a data leak happens, what are your obligations? There isn't going to. It's building that kind of that team around you to make sure that you get the best kind of advice that you can for the situations that you may not be fully prepared for at the time. And that's kind of just making sure that as you said, the super sub, making sure that at what time, who it is that, and what skills are you going to need.
Absolutely. So, hey, team, I'm just looking at the time and realizing we're only 42 minutes over game. We've gone 42 minutes into extra time, but it's been so useful. So what I'm thinking is I'll ask you to start thinking of your closing remarks. So I'll give you a bit of time to think about accumulating everything that we've talked about and what is pertinent to your area of specialty and those people that you work with and would like to hear more from. But my little summary here is that we've heard from a range of the team who have specializations in different areas, and the concept that I sort of thought about, because I always have a rugby analogy somewhere, whether you know I'm going to do it or not, there's always a rugby analogy of that super sub. You've got to bring in an expert who's got all this experience of working in that particular area or doing that particular thing, and it seems as though Hudson Gavin Martin is full of experts and leaders in their space. I certainly would say that, but you probably know I'm a bit biased because I'm a client and a friend. But it's just been brilliant to hear a rundown. So if I think of telco and media and the extent of the way new software is being able to deliver different types of content, to the GDPR, data collection protection, and things that's happening in the retail space that we've heard from Ed. Sarah Jane, who covered among a range of things around startups and predominantly raising money, raising existing capital, not just startups, could be further down the chain, but the legal aspects and thoughts, and we obviously touched on the mental health side of it. And then, of course, Andrew Dentis, the fintech specialist. I didn't know that you were on the panel of a large global bank of fintech. That's a bit of experience to bring home with you, so good to hear. So with that, and of course, I can't forget Simon. Brilliant overview, and I guess a bit of the umbrella perspective across all areas. With 30 years in the game, won't make any jokes about age. You actually look younger than I am, so you got more hair. So with that, who would like to? Shall we kick off with Charlie up on my left? Probably on everyone else's right. Closing remarks.
I guess for us, we feel really privileged, Ryan, to work with the clients that we do and to learn from them as well in terms of how to face challenging times and actually be really creative in the solutions that they come up with and use and leverage resources that they already have to provide creative solutions into the market. So that's a real privilege.
Thank you. And now we'll go to Ed.
Yeah, I think I know this is not a COVID discussion, but I'm really, it's been great to work with a lot of tech clients who actually last year during lockdown, I thought, geez, a lot of our clients are going to be a bit of trouble, but a lot of them have pulled through and are doing really, really well. And, I hate using the word pivoted, but some have pivoted to do things which are really helping them grow. So it's great for the sector, for the tech sector. And, a few years ago, tech sector wanted to be number one in terms of exports, and unfortunately, we'll get there because of what's happened. So.
Well done for getting the word pivot into the discussion and referencing the subject we're not going to mention. So absolutely brilliant little rundown there. Now I've put Andrew up in there because we're not going to put Andrew last this time. So Andrew, over to you.
Amazing. I'll still be really short. I just want to say thanks for having us, really. It's a really fun discussion. I think, as I said before, really nice to sometimes step back and hear what others of my colleagues are doing and thinking about. So thanks for having us mainly. And yeah, it was a great time that we all had, I think.
Brilliant. And then we'll come to yourself, Sarah Jane.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us, Ryan. And for me, it's often working with the clients on the journey they get to go through, because I get them to join them basically at the start of their journey, often with the startup side of things, but working with some really passionate individuals and teams who are building fantastic businesses and solutions, and just seeing how they grow and develop, and to use Ed's words, pivot as well, and move right through their journey. I think that's just a really exciting part of the work I do.
Absolutely. And I think about it, most of my roles that I've been in, whether it be at Computer World or CIO Summit or even AFQY, being in the middle of a whole range of organizations gives you that exposure to what they're doing. And usually mine's around sales and marketing. Each of yours will be around your particular specialized areas, but being able to get exposure to all the cool and interesting things that people are doing. So thank you very much. And we'll bring on Simon. He can go last in this case, because that's a good way to close it out. Thank you, Mr. Martin. So if you could share your closing thoughts.
Sure. Look, thanks. This has been awesome. And thank you to anybody that's kind of lasted the extra 42 minutes or longer now. So I'll try and keep this really brief. But change is happening. Change is going to happen. And I just don't think that we can ignore it. That you don't have to do it alone is what I would say. What I've seen with so many clients is that there are so many people that want to see businesses succeed, because actually if the business succeeds, then everybody succeeds. So look to your customers, look to your service providers, look to your team. They all have fantastic ideas about where the friction in your business is and how to improve it.
Brilliant. Well, hey, look, we do actually have the last word from a client by the looks of it. So don't worry, I wouldn't be putting it up if it wasn't great. So this is his name doesn't show, but what I can see on my other screen is Steve W. There's a biotech company that is in the closing stages of a very long protracted capital raise. I can't give enough props to the HGM team. It's been exasperating at times, and having them, Charlie and Sarah Jane in particular, in our corner has certainly been critically important for the process and my mental health. So thank you, Steve W. I don't even know Steve W's last name, but I can see his picture on the other screen there. So, thank you very much. That's exactly what we want to sort of hear, because that's the other side of the coin, I guess, and a great way to close out today's session. So I just want to say thank you very much to the team at HGM. Thank you, Charlie, Simon, Sarah Jane, Ed, Andrew, and of course to everybody out there who tuned in for a Yarn Live for the first 30 minutes or for the whole thing. We've got time-stamped comments about what people were speaking about throughout the comments, so you are able to fast forward to a specific section if you'd like to. And I'm just going to check out another couple of comments there. One from Doug Casement.
Thanks, Doug.
Yes, and they've also got Toby Collar. Great presentation. Oh, look. There's a few more coming through. So thank you very much. It's great to know that there's people on the other end. I see the numbers of how many people are viewing, but I don't know who they are. So it's great to see the feedback of people. So that's brilliant. So with that, we'll be able to say ka kite anō. So do you think if I do a count of 1, 2, 3, we can all say ka kite anō together?
Yeah.
Bit of team collaboration. All right. Tahi, rua, tahu, ka kite anō.
Yeah, no.
Come on, team, where's our timing? Do I throw you out by counting?
We work like that, yeah. Boom,
okay.
Boom, boom.
So on the count of 3, I'll just do 1, 2, 3. Ka kite anō.
Yeah.
Hey,